We were pinned in the ravine with the radios dead quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your own heartbeat sound like a mistake. Night vision washed everything in dull green. Rock, scrub. Shadows stacked on top of shadows. My team was frozen behind cover, rifles up, fingers tight, breathing slowed on purpose. Across the ravine, I saw him, not just movement. A man. The enemy point man stepped forward into a sliver of moonlight, older than the rest, calm in a way that felt practiced. His eyes lifted and stopped exactly where they shouldn't have. For a second, through glass and distance, we locked onto each other. A chess match. He hesitated. Not fear, calculation. Near his boot, half buried in dirt, was a rusted strand of cattle wire, Wyoming ranch land. American soil, and a foreign rifle standing over it. My mouth tasted like copper. Blood rushed in my ears so loud it sounded like water breaking through a dam. Behind me, a safety clicked off. Someone whispered, barely breathing. We can't hit them. We had the angle. We had the numbers. What we did not have was certainty, and uncertainty kills faster than bullets. Every second we waited, he learned us. Every second, the window narrowed. I was the commander. The first woman this team had ever followed into real contact. I could feel every doubt pressing into the silence. If I hesitated, they would never forget it. If I rushed it, someone would not make it home. I took a breath, steadied my hand, and gave the order that changed everything. Subscribe to my channel, Lady Veteran Stories, for more real military stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I was given command in the spring of 2014 out of a low concrete operations building tucked into the trees near Redstone Ridge, North Carolina. It was not a place anyone outside the service would recognize. No gates worth photographing. No flag snapping for ceremony. Just pine needles ground into asphalt, fluorescent lights that hummed even when the rooms were empty, and people who learned early how to do their work without being noticed. I had been in the teams for 14 years by then, long enough to stop counting rotations, long enough to know which memories stayed quiet and which ones surfaced when sleep thinned out. Iraq, Afghanistan, places that shrink down to coordinates once you leave them. None of that mattered in the room where I first met the unit. What mattered was the absence. Their last commander had been carried out of a fight the year before, alive but finished. Broken legs, a long recovery that would never end in another deployment. To them, he was not former command. He was unfinished loyalty. And I was not him. They did not stand when I walked in. They did not need to say anything. The spacing between chairs said enough. The way conversation slowed but did not stop. Respect held back, not out of disrespect, but caution. They had trusted once. They were careful about doing it again. Senior Chief Daniel Cross sat near the door, as if ready to leave at any moment. He was the oldest among them, the kind of operator whose reputation traveled faster than his name. He did not challenge me. He did not smile either. His eyes tracked everything I did, cataloging tone and timing the way other people count steps. He was not waiting for me to fail. He was waiting to see if I would get them killed. I kept my introduction short. No speeches, no reading off qualifications. In this world, credentials either show up in how you move or they don't show up at all. I told them where we were headed and what the mission was supposed to be. Then I dismissed them. The deployment took us west into a mountain region outside a small place called Silver Hollow, Wyoming. Not a town so much as a scatter of buildings and dirt roads that survived on routine. Ranch land. Fences, wind. On paper, it was joint training support, observation, integration, the kind of assignment that sounds harmless until it stops being that. Our task was interdiction and surveillance along a rugged corridor that had seen unexplained movement. Watch. Confirm. Do not engage unless forced. Quiet work. the kind that rewards patience and punishes assumptions. From the start, it felt wrong. The intelligence briefings were thin in ways that made no sense. Maps were clean where terrain never is. Enemy presence was described as low-level militia. Poorly trained, poorly equipped. But what we saw did not match the language. Movement patterns were disciplined. Spacing was consistent. Routes overlapped intelligently. These were not locals wandering with rifles. These were teams moving with purpose, adjusting to terrain like they had studied it. I logged a discrepancy after the first observation window, sent it up. I flagged it again after the second night. The response came back calm and empty. No additional indicators, no change in posture. Continue mission as briefed. That was my first warning. The second came from the ground itself, from small, unsettling details that did not belong together. Boot prints that cut across cattle paths. A crushed soda can tucked into a rock crevice where no hiker would have reason to stop. A fence line clipped cleanly, not broken by animals. Domestic signs violated quietly. American land. Wrong presence. The team felt it too. Humor dried up. Gear checks doubled. No one slept deeply. These were men who trusted patterns, and the patterns were lying. I watched them closely. Not to assert authority, to listen. Leadership in a new unit is not about control. It is about learning when to speak and when to let silence teach you. Cross approached me on the fourth day after sunset, when the wind cut through layers and made everything feel closer than it should. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, "this doesn't feel like training." There was no challenge in it. No edge. Just warning. The kind that comes from someone who has learned the cost of being wrong. He was right. I adjusted our posture immediately. Slower movement. Longer observation windows. No aggressive pushes to satisfy timelines. On paper, it probably looked passive. In reality, it was deliberate restraint. Those decisions never get remembered when they work. That was also when the pressure started. Higher command wanted updates, progress markers, confirmation that the operation was unfolding the way it was supposed to. Words like tempo and efficiency showed up in messages. I answered professionally and carefully. I asked for clarity. I asked for sourcing. What I wanted was certainty. What I got was silence. By the time the ravine operation came up, the air already felt heavy. Cold enough to sting the lungs. Quiet enough to make every step sound loud in your head. A place where ranchers once ran cattle, now holding men with rifles who did not belong there. I checked my watch as we stepped off. 1:27 in the morning. The hour when doubt creeps in. The hour when leadership stops being theoretical. And I remember knowing, with a clarity that settled deep, that whatever happened next would decide more than the outcome of a single mission. It would decide whether this team ever truly followed me, or only survived me. By the third night in the field, the team had stopped questioning my orders out loud. That did not mean they trusted them. It meant they were disciplined enough to hold their doubts inside. In this line of work, silence is not agreement. It is control. They moved when told. Halted when told. No pushback over comms. No second guessing during movement, but I could feel the distance. Trust was being withheld the same way ammunition is conserved. Carefully. On purpose. Small things started to slip out of alignment. Patrol routes changed without explanation. Paths that had been clear the night before showed fresh movement. Drone feeds blinked out for seconds at a time, never long enough to justify aborting, always long enough to raise the hair on your arms. The kind of interference that feels deliberate but leaves no fingerprints. Unease crept in, not panic. Something worse. The quiet sense that the ground was shifting beneath us and no one could point to the exact moment it started. During a late briefing, when the shelter smelled like cold fabric and stale breath, Senior Chief Cross finally spoke. He waited until the room settled, until everyone else had sat around the problem instead of at it. "Ma'am," he said, steady and low, "this feels wrong." He wasn't challenging my authority. He was offering his experience. "There is a difference, and it matters." I took it seriously. That night, I adjusted our posture. We slowed our movement deliberately. Observation windows stretched longer. We stopped pushing into terrain just to check boxes on a timeline. To anyone reading the reports later, it would look cautious. To anyone who had buried friends, it would look familiar. Those decisions rarely get noticed when they save lives. That was when the pressure began. Higher command wanted progress, updates that showed momentum. Words like tempo and efficiency started appearing in messages. I responded with facts, not confidence. I asked for sourcing. I asked why movement patterns didn't match the brief. The replies came back clean and empty. Continue mission. No change in assessment. I could feel the team watching me more closely after that. Not to see if I would panic, to see which way I would lean when pressure applied. Toward comfort or toward caution. The night of the ravine operation arrived without warning or buildup, just another briefing. Another route drawn by someone far away. Another set of conditions written for a version of the mission that no longer existed. The orders were simple. Observe. Confirm presence. Do not engage unless compromised. Simple orders are dangerous. They leave too much room for interpretation when reality changes. We stepped off just after midnight. The cold cut through layers and settled into joints. The terrain funneled us naturally, narrowing options with every step. Rock walls. Scrub. Limited cover. I remember thinking the place felt designed to punish anyone who trusted maps more than instincts. The team moved clean. Quiet. Controlled. These were men who knew how to disappear when they needed to. That was when we made first visual contact. At first it looked routine. Movement across the valley floor. A small patrol, just visible through night vision. Then they adjusted. Spacing tightened. Angles covered that militia would never think to cover. My stomach tightened. This wasn't random traffic. I raised my hand. The team froze instantly. No hesitation, no questions. We watched. And the longer we watched, the clearer it became that we weren't observing them. They were shaping the ground around us. I checked my watch. 1:30 something in the morning. Time loses its meaning in moments like that. Seconds stretch. Minutes vanish. Radio stayed quiet. No chatter. No breathing. Just the soft hum of equipment and wind sliding through stone. I ran the order through my head again. Observe. Confirm. Do not engage unless compromised. We weren't compromised yet, but we were close. That's the lie orders tell you sometimes. That compromise is a clear line you'll recognize when you cross it. In reality, it announces itself quietly, and by the time it's obvious, you're already behind it. I felt the team tighten behind me. Muscles coiled, minds racing. They weren't waiting for permission. They were waiting for direction. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. This mission was no longer about following orders. It was about deciding when those orders stopped protecting us, and when leadership had to take their place. We entered the ravine just after 1:40 in the morning. The cold settled immediately, sharp and dry, the kind that bites through fabric and makes joints feel older than they are. A thin slice of moon hung above the rock walls, just enough light to make shadows deeper instead of helpful. The farther we moved in, the tighter the walls closed around us, stone narrowing our choices without asking permission. That was when I saw him again, the same man from earlier, the enemy point man. He stepped into a gap between shadows with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was. Older than the rest, shoulders relaxed, Rifle carried low, not because he was careless, but because he did not feel rushed. Near his boot, half buried in frozen dirt, was a length of rusted barbed wire sagging between broken fence posts. Ranchland, cattle country. A place where nothing violent was supposed to happen. The wrongness of it pressed into my chest harder than the cold. American soil, a foreign rifle standing over it. We were not compromised yet. No shouts. No sudden movement toward us. But the space between safety and disaster had thinned to something fragile, like ice you test with your weight already committed. The team folded into cover without a word. Rifles came up in clean lines. Breathing slowed, counted. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, a rushing sound like water trapped behind pressure. Someone murmured it almost to themselves. "This is bad." They were right. The rules said, wait, observe, confirm, do not engage. The rules assumed time is neutral. The terrain told a different story. This ravine funneled movement and stole exits. Waiting here did not buy safety. It traded it away. Across from us, the enemy commander adjusted his stance and raised his rifle slightly, not aiming yet. Testing. His eyes moved across the rock face in small, precise arcs. He was not searching wildly. He was narrowing options. Our eyes met again through night vision, just for a second. He saw something, not a body. A shape that did not belong. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I felt the moment stretch, the air going thin around it. Behind me, I heard it. A safety clicking off. The sound cut through the silence like a crack of lightning in my head. Senior Chief Cross, his instinct was right. Anyone's would have been. The enemy commander shifted his weight, boot brushing against a crushed soda can tucked into the dirt near the fence. A mundane, stupid thing that did not belong in a place like this. It made everything feel unreal and horribly personal at the same time. This was not overseas. This was not a desert or a village half a world away. This was Wyoming. This was wrong. Cross's finger tightened. I could feel it without turning. I knew the posture, the readiness. The moment when training screams louder than restraint. For a split second, he thought I was freezing. That I had missed the window. That waiting one more heartbeat would get someone killed. He glanced at me. I turned just enough for him to see my hand. Closed fist, flat palm. Hold, not hesitation. Not doubt. A decision. I saw the struggle flicker across his face, fast and sharp, survival telling him to fire. Experience telling him to trust the structure. Leadership forcing him to choose between the two. He chose. The safety stayed off. The shot did not come. Across the ravine, the enemy commander felt it. The absence of gunfire where it should have been, the reaction that never arrived. His brow furrowed slightly as he reassessed. He was no longer dictating the tempo. Something had shifted, and he did not yet know what. That was when I understood exactly what the terrain was offering us. The ravine curved in a way that created a narrow funnel just beyond the enemy's forward position, a dead space they believed was safe. If they advanced one more step, they would stack themselves into overlapping lines they could not break contact from quickly. A kill box shaped like stone in shadow. We didn't need to fire yet. We needed to open the door. I gave the quiet order, not to engage. To shift. The team moved like water finding cracks. Overwatch slid higher without noise. The left element eased back just enough to draw attention. The right tightened, closing angles the enemy had not accounted for. We adjusted by inches, by degrees, reshaping the ground without announcing it. The enemy commander stepped forward to see better, and then he saw it. Not us, the space. The realization hit his face hard and fast. The understanding that the next step would not be brave. It would be fatal. He raised his fist. The signal passed down his line. They stopped. For a long, heavy moment, No one moved on either side. The ravine held its breath. Blood rushed in my ears. The taste of copper filled my mouth. Leadership lived in that pause, not in order shouted, but in restraint held. I stayed still, forced my breathing slow, let him sit with what he had seen. Finally, he made his choice, not forward, away. And in that moment, I knew the fight had already been decided. We had not fired a shot, but we had won control. And that mattered more than anything that came next. I ran the options through my head faster than I could have spoken them. Pull back and risk exposure in the open. Hold position and let them continue to tighten the space until there was nowhere left to breathe. Or act without perfect clarity and accept whatever followed. There was no clean choice. Only consequences. I chose action. Not noise, not aggression meant to force control. This was quieter than that, surgical. Measured. I shifted my weight just enough for the signal to carry. 2 fingers, a short motion. The kind of language you learn when words would get people killed. The team responded immediately, breaking and reforming without sound. No one looked back at me. They didn't need to. They knew the structure. They trusted the geometry even if they were still deciding whether to trust me. We didn't move far. That was the point. Overwatch, repositioned by inches, sliding higher into shadow instead of stepping into silhouette. The left element eased backward just enough to look like hesitation. The right closed in quietly, tightening angles. The ravine hid well. I adjusted the shape of the fight by degrees, not distance. Small changes that matter only if you understand what comes next. Across the ravine, the enemy commander felt it before he could explain it. His posture shifted. His rifle came up another inch. He was no longer comfortable. He was sensing absence where resistance should have been. I slowed the team deliberately. Speed would have betrayed us. Patience let the enemy commit to his assumptions. I could hear my own breathing in my headset, steady only because I forced it to be. My mouth stayed dry, copper sharp on my tongue. Blood rushed in my ears, loud as moving water. This was where command lived, not in confidence, in control. Cross moved into position without a glance back. His shoulder was stiff, but his rifle tracked clean. He trusted the setup now, even if he was still measuring me. That mattered. Trust in the system comes before trust in the person. The enemy adjusted again. One man stepped out too far, trying to see what had changed. Another lingered behind him, uncertain. Their spacing loosened by just enough to matter. They were feeling it, not us. The shape of the ground. I held the team there, balanced between readiness and restraint. We were not frozen. We were coiled. Prepared to fire, but not committed. The kind of posture that looks passive from the outside and feels unbearable from the inside. This was the moment where collapse hides, not in chaos, in impatience, in the urge to release tension just to feel movement again. I refused it. I adjusted one element again, barely visible. A step back into shadow, a degree left. The ravine responded the way terrain always does when you listen to it. The enemy commander stepped forward to compensate. And then he saw it, the funnel. The narrow corridor of stone and shadow that would stack his people into overlapping lines they could not escape once contact started. A place where the first shot would be the last mistake. I saw the realization land in his eyes. The same understanding I'd reached earlier now mirrored back at me from across the ravine. We didn't just move, we opened a door. And when he looked inside, he saw a grave. He raised his hand sharply. The signal moved down his line fast and clean. Discipline does not vanish just because advantage does. They pulled back slowly at first, testing, then with more urgency once they understood how close they had come. Not panic. Professional withdrawal. The kind that admits loss without inviting slaughter. I did not chase them. Chasing would have turned advantage into arrogance. The terrain still belonged to the ravine, not to us. Victory earned quietly can be lost loudly. I held the team in place until the last shadow disappeared and the silence settled again, thick and charged. Only then did I let my shoulders drop a fraction. Only then did I allow myself to acknowledge how close we had been. The team stayed locked in, no celebration, no release. They understood without being told. This was not over. But the balance had shifted, and for the first time that night we were no longer reacting. We were in control. The first contact did not come with shouting or a sudden rush of fire. It came with the silence breaking in the wrong way. A shadow shifted where nothing should have moved. Just a fraction. Just enough. Then a radio clicked once, sharp and accidental, the sound punching through the ravine like a dropped tool on concrete. Whoever caused it knew immediately. So did I. Too late. The first shots cracked almost on top of us, sharp and disciplined, snapping into stone with a violence that folded sound back on itself. Rock chipped and skittered across the ground. Dust burst into the air, fine and choking. The echo made distance meaningless. It felt like everything was happening inside my head. Contact, someone said, controlled but tight. Senior Chief Cross went down hard to my right. Not hit. Thrown off balance by movement and concussion. His shoulder slammed into rock with a sound I felt more than heard. For half a second he didn't move, and that half second stretched thin enough to scare me. The world collapsed inward. No valley, no horizon. Just angles and noise, and the weight of decisions stacking too fast to count. Commands shortened to single words. Hands moved where they had moved 1,000 times before. Fear lived at the edges of everything. Not panic, not chaos. The kind of fear that sharpens your vision and steals your peripheral awareness at the same time. The kind that tells you exactly how much there is to lose. This was the moment everything could fall apart. I dropped to one knee and keyed my mic, forcing my voice into calm it didn't feel. Shouting makes people rush. Rushing gets people killed. Hold sectors. Do not chase sound. The enemy fire probed more than it pressed. Controlled bursts. They weren't spraying. They were testing reactions, waiting for someone to overcorrect, to stand, to fire blind. Professionals hunt mistakes. I crawled across, keeping low, letting the rock absorb what it could. He blinked hard, sucked in a breath, then nodded once. Pain was there. I could see it in the tight line of his mouth. But pain wasn't winning. Rounds snapped overhead, close enough to feel the pressure wave brush past my face. Stone dust mixed with cold breath, the smell sharp and mineral, layered with the faint ozone of hot metal. My mouth was dry, copper-heavy on my tongue. A short burst cracked from the left element. Clean. Accurate. Check fire, I said immediately. The shot hadn't been wrong. It had been early. Early reveals position. Position invites focus. The enemy adjusted, sliding laterally, trying to stretch us, trying to find the seam we were protecting. They moved with confidence that came from experience, not bravado. Left element anchor, I said. Right element hold. Overwatch, wait. Every order cost time. Every pause cost ground. The balance was thin and unforgiving. Another burst slammed into the rock just above my head. Stones sprayed down my neck and into my collar. I didn't flinch. Flinching spreads. Cross was back up now, rifle tracking smoothly despite the hit. He glanced at me once, not for reassurance. For confirmation that the plan still existed, I nodded. That was enough. The enemy pressed slightly harder, still disciplined, still patient. They wanted us loud. They wanted us predictable. They wanted us to commit to a fight they could shape. I slowed everything down again, even as rounds continued to crack and echo. Short commands, small corrections. No emotion in my voice. Emotion is contagious. Calm is too. One of the younger operators froze for half a breath when a round struck close, stone exploding near his cover. I caught it immediately. "Breathe," I said, low and firm. "You're covered." He moved again, just like that. This is what collapse looks like before it happens. Not screaming. Not running. Small pauses. Missed beats. I refused to let them stack. Across the ravine, I caught sight of the enemy commander again. His face was tighter now. Less calm. He had expected a different reaction. His men shifted, uncertain where the pressure was coming from. He lingered a fraction too long near the edge of cover. I did not take the shot. That surprised some of my people. I felt it in the slight tension that rippled through the line. They wanted release. They wanted the fight to resolve into something simpler. That shot would have locked us into his terms. Instead, I shifted cross and overwatch together by inches, tightening the shape quietly while the enemy believed they were dictating tempo. Geometry, not bravado. Fire slowed. That was more dangerous than the opening contact. Slowing meant reassessment. It meant the enemy was deciding whether to press or break, whether they had enough information to commit. I knew what that meant for us. If they committed, we would have to answer hard and fast. If they broke, we had to let them go without chasing into darkness we didn't own. Either way, this was the hinge. The team held together on discipline alone, no speeches, no encouragement, just trust in the structure we were inside. Trust that restraint was not weakness. I checked every element again in my head. Positions, angles, spacing. Everyone was where they needed to be. No one drifting, no one rushing. I keyed the mic once more. "Stay with me," I said quietly. Not a command, a reminder, a reminder. They did. Then the firing stopped completely. Silence flooded back into the ravine, heavier than before, loaded with possibility. Blood rushed in my ears like water behind pressure. My hands shook slightly where no one could see them. I did not relax. Silence after contact is never empty. It waits. And whatever came next would decide whether this night ended with engines and extraction, or with names added to a list that never forgets. I stepped into the open just long enough to be seen, not recklessly, not fully exposed, just enough movement to register as intention instead of accident. I knew exactly how it would read on the other side. A commander growing impatient. A silhouette where there shouldn't be one. A mistake begging to be punished. Across the ravine, the enemy commander noticed immediately. His head lifted. His rifle came up a fraction. I could see the calculation behind his eyes through night vision, the same process I was running in my own head. He was waiting for the follow-up, the surge of fire, the rush that would confirm we were reacting to him. It didn't come. I gave the order they did not expect, not to fire, to shift. It was quiet. Almost nothing. A signal passed hand to hand, shoulder to shoulder, without sound. The team moved as one, not fast, not slow, but deliberately. Overwatch slid higher into shadow. The right element tightened. The left faded just enough to suggest uncertainty. We didn't just move, we opened a door. The enemy commander leaned forward to see better, stepping exactly where the ravine tempted him to step, and in that instant I saw understanding hit him hard. The ground ahead of him wasn't empty, it was a funnel. Rock walls narrowing, escape routes pinched off. Angles overlapping in ways that didn't look dangerous until you understood what lived inside them. One more step, and his element would stack itself into a kill box they could not outrun or outshoot. I watched his jaw tighten. That hesitation was everything. He raised his hand sharply. The signal traveled down his line fast and clean. Discipline doesn't disappear just because advantage slips. When we engaged, it was controlled and brief. Short bursts, clear lanes. No wasted movement. Enough fire to make the message unmistakable. Enough to make retreat the only smart choice. The enemy broke contact within minutes. Not panic, not collapse. A professional withdrawal that came too late to be clean. They left equipment behind because carrying it would have slowed them. They left blood dark against pale stone because not everyone made it out intact. We did not pursue. That was the hardest order of the night. The instinct to chase is powerful, especially when momentum turns in your favor. But the ravine still belonged to the terrain, not to us. Pride has a body count, and I wasn't adding to it. The firing stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Silence returned, thick and ringing. I held the team in place longer than anyone wanted. No movement. No talking, just listening. Making sure the quiet stayed honest. When I finally gave the signal to move, it was measured and slow. We extracted the way we had entered, controlled, accounted for. No one ran. No one lagged. Cross moved beside me, stiff but steady. He didn't say anything yet. He didn't need to. At the rally point, we counted heads. No friendly deaths. Injuries, yes. Bruises. Cuts. The kind that announced themselves later. Confidence shaken? Absolutely. But we walked out. And as we left the ravine behind, I felt something shift in the team. Not relief. Not celebration. Recognition. They understood how close it had been. How one rushed decision would have turned restraint into disaster. When the engines finally turned over and the dark started to fall back where it belonged, Cross leaned toward me and spoke just loud enough to be heard. Good call. It wasn't praise. It was acceptance. And in that world, that meant everything. Back at the temporary site near Hollow Creek Station, the engines shut down one by one, and the night rushed back in around us. Floodlights snapped on, washing everything in a flat white glare that made faces look older than they had a few hours earlier. Gear stayed on longer than necessary. Helmets were unclipped and rested at boots instead of being set aside. No one spoke. There was nothing to say that would not feel forced. The place smelled like cold metal, dust, and the faint bite of burned powder still clinging to gear. Med checks happened quietly. Cuts were cleaned, bruises wrapped. Someone passed around water, and hands took it without comment. The normal post-mission noise never arrived. Senior Chief Cross sat on a crate near the edge of the lot, shoulders stiff, jaw set. He stared at the ground for a long moment, working through something only he could see. Then he looked up at me and nodded once. That was it. No apology for the doubt he had carried, no praise for the call I had made. Just acknowledgement. In that culture, among people like that, it carried more weight than words ever could. The rest of the team saw it. They didn't react. They logged it the same way they logged everything else that mattered. Quietly. Permanently. I didn't address them. No speech waited inside me. Command does not always require explanation. Sometimes it requires knowing when silence is the right response. They needed rest more than reflection. Later, when the site finally settled and the watch rotations took over, I sat alone with the report. I could have handed it off. I didn't. I wrote it myself, line by line, knowing every word would be read by people who weren't there and never would be. I documented every deviation from the original orders, every shift in posture, every decision made with incomplete information. I didn't soften the language or hide behind phrasing. Ownership matters more on paper than it does anywhere else. I signed my name at the bottom and felt the weight of it settle in. Command doesn't end when the shooting stops. Sometimes that's when it truly begins. Sleep came in pieces after that. When it did, it never stayed. I replayed the ravine in fragments. The moment our eyes locked across the dark. The click of the radio. The second cross went down. The pause where everything balanced on restraint. I slept badly for weeks. Not because I doubted the choices, because responsibility doesn't shut off when the mission does. It waits. It asks questions when the noise is gone. What stayed with me most wasn't the fear. It was the change in the team afterward. The way they moved on the next operation, no hesitation at orders. No second-guessing in motion, not blind obedience. Something stronger, trust. They still questioned plans and briefings. They still spoke up when something felt wrong. But once a decision was made, they moved, together. Without delay. That difference keeps people alive. No one ever talked about the ravine again. That's how I knew it mattered. The moments that truly change a unit rarely get discussed. They settle in quietly and reshape habits from the inside. Higher command reviewed the report. Questions came back. Clarifications requested. No reprimand. No praise. Just acceptance. That was enough. On the next mission, when the night pressed in and the ground felt uncertain again, I felt the shift immediately. The team didn't wait for proof this time. They waited for direction. And that trust, once earned, is something you carry carefully, knowing it can be lost faster than it was given. I never forgot that. Because teams don't remember you for how confident you looked when everything was under control. They remember you for how steady you were when it wasn't. And once they see that, truly see it, they don't hesitate again. Years later, I still think about that ravine. Not because of the gunfire or the cold or how close everything came to breaking. I think about the moment just before it. The second when doubt sat heavy in the air and everyone was waiting to see which way it would tip. That is the moment that stays with you. Leadership is not about being believed before the test arrives. Most of the time, it is not even about being trusted. It is about being steady when everything else feels uncertain. About making a decision when there is no perfect answer, only responsibility you are willing to carry. I did not change everything that night by being fearless. I wasn't fearless. I felt the weight of every person behind me and understood exactly what a wrong call would cost. What changed the outcome was clarity. The refusal to let hesitation turn into danger. The willingness to act without hiding behind orders that no longer fit the reality in front of us. That kind of clarity does not feel heroic when it happens. It feels quiet, heavy, isolating. And afterward, it follows you longer than adrenaline ever does. People don't remember your rank or the confidence in your voice. They remember whether you were present when it mattered, whether you stayed calm when silence pressed in, whether you owned the consequences of your decisions without deflecting them onto someone else. That is what leadership leaves behind. Not noise, not stories meant to impress. Just memory, just trust. Just the knowledge that when the moment came, someone stood steady enough for everyone else to move. I carry that lesson with me still. Into every room, every decision, every quiet pause where the ground feels uncertain again. Subscribe to my channel, Lady Veteran Stories, for more real military stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from.